Glenfarclas 17 versus Balvenie Doublewood 17-year-old. Which of these deserves a spot on your whiskey shelf most? Stay tuned for the Whiskey Whistle. Hello, my whiskey freaks. Mark here from WhiskyWhistle on YouTube, sharing a little whiskey awesomeness from Winnipeg, the center of North America, bringing you a very special 2-up of Speyside single malt Scotch whiskies. And they're both 17 years old. They're both 43% ABV, which is good. It's not great, but it's good. Both of them are sherry influenced. In the case of Glenfarclas, that's a full 17 years in ex Oloroso. As for the Balvenie, we've got a number of years in refill casks, what the industry likes to call traditional whiskey casks. The only thing that's traditional about them is the fact that they've been used again and again. And then extra matured in sherry casks. That's where the sherry component comes in here. The Glenfarclas, let me get those poured while I'm talking here. The Glenfarclas, which is the one we'll start with. This one is natural in color, and as you'll see, it's quite light. There we are. Versus the Balvenie 17 Doublewood, which didn't spend its whole life in ex-sherry. And we see that it's quite a bit darker, and it's got a particular orange kind of a glow to it, kind of a marker of having color added. So you can compare those side by side. We've got a nice light amber, almost a lemony hue with Glenfarclas, and then we have this decidedly orange-esque color here with the Balvenie. And if that's being discontinued and they're going to put out something else, you know, of that age, 17, 18, 19 years old, let's hope that it's 46% ABV. Let's hope that it's unchill filtered, and let's hope that it is going to be natural in color. Some other interesting things about these two distilleries that I want to point out is that they're both quite traditional in many ways. Over at Glenfarclas, they use direct fire stills. So the heat source is acting on the bottom, on the outside of the still, which actually will induce a little bit of caramelization on sugars and a little bit of Maillard reaction on proteins. And these things most assuredly affect the spirit. And I find it always has this nice little bit of flinty, gunpowdery type of a flavor that makes that really complex. And then over at Balvenie Distillery, they have their own floor maltings. So this is a floor malted single malt, and that in and of itself is very traditional and very special. So both of these have some very special aspects to their production. So anyway, we looked at the color. Let's check out the legs of these two side by side. And then we'll get into the tasting notes. And I'm going to start with Glenfarclas. We'll try it neat, and then we'll try it with water. And then we'll get on to Balvenie 17 Doublewood. Do the same thing. Try it neat, try it with water. We'll give each of them a Whiskey Whistle whiskey score at the right time. And then at the end, just for a bit of fun, we'll compare them side by side. So let's check out the legs on these two. You know what? Very similar legs. A little bit thin, but they do develop a little bit more showily. Does that make sense? And I feel like the Balvenie has a little bit more of a syrupy texture to it, but you know, it's really hard to tell. The Glenfarclas also is very drizzly with its, I guess, the third legs, which are now drizzling down. All right. We'll get into the nosing now, but first of all, don't forget to subscribe to Whiskey Whistle. You can click the link right over here and hit the bell as well, ding ding, so that you're notified of future Whiskey Whistles. And get involved here. Have you tried these? Leave a comment, share it with your whiskey club. Let's see what people think about my comparison, and what do you think of the comparison of these two whiskeys? And before I forget, another major difference here that should have been one of the first things mentioned is price. So the difference between the Glenfarclas to the Balvenie is a factor of 2. A factor of 2. It's twice as expensive. So that's another kind of talking point we'll have to address, and I'll share my thoughts on whether or not it's worth it. So that's really, really important here. But yes, please subscribe. And if you're enjoying Whiskey Whistle and you like what I do, or if you're watching it for the first time and you're really gung-ho about the channel, then why not jump in and support the channel on Patreon. Patreon.com/WhiskyWhistle will get you there. And whether it's $1 or $2 or more, I'd love to have your support. And as a little incentive, you'll get your name in the credits at the end of each video. And you'll also get advanced viewing of future Whiskey Whistles. Last but not least, you will be eligible to get a Whiskey Whistle glass once you've reached a certain threshold, about $3 or $4. Let's just say that's called karma. Beautiful. Okay, so let's get into the Glenfarclas, and I'm going to put away these canisters because they really do take up a lot of space, a lot of real estate. There we go. That's a little bit cleaner, I think. And I think, as I've talked about in previous videos, a lot of distilleries are moving away from the canisters and the boxes, and just selling the bottles bare. What do you think of that? Does it make sense to have standard NAS 12-year-old, even 17-year-old whiskeys? Do they deserve to be in a box? Of course, it does prevent breakage. That's important. But from the standpoint of the earth, do we need it? Can we just be a little more careful? Anyway, on to the nose. So right away you get that flint. It's a flint, or it's an extinguished match. That little bit of that first smell when you first light the match. I actually quite like that smell. So you get a little bit of that there. You get lots of raspberry, lots of interesting bright red raspberries. There is candied ginger. A little bit of pickled ginger as well. And we have some beautiful candy apples with the red crunchy coating. So candy apples, we've got the raspberry. A touch of orange rind as well. And then very slowly you get some rich, very dark, dried fruits coming through. But the lighter raisins, not the really, really dark ones. And some fresher figs rather than dried. And it's got a dusty kind of overall style. If you're a rye lover and you want to dabble into some older Scotch whiskey, that might be something you might enjoy. And this as well is a very yesteryear, old-fashioned style of single malt. And this is the style of single malt Scotch whiskey that got me into single malt Scotch whiskey in my early 20s, a long, long time ago. But I love the fruity edge to it, and I like that little kick of that flintiness, which to me just makes this really, really complex, interesting, delightful. All right, onto the palate. Cheers, folks. Welcome to Whiskey Whistle. Delicate, fresh, red fruits, but also orchard fruits, and a little bit of a waft of that underlying, maybe a little kiss of peat, tiny little kiss of that that flintiness that comes from the direct firing of the stills that induces caramelization and Maillard reactions. What's that, you're asking? That is the darkening of proteins. For example, steak on the barbecue, the dark bits, that's not caramelization because that's not sugar. That's called a Maillard reaction. So yeah, there's a little bit of umami here. But it's nicely sweet, a touch of tartness, very little astringency, very light, delicate astringency, very light tannins. Now, though it's all 100% ex oloroso, obviously there's a lot of second fill. I would guess there's even some third fill in this vatting of different ages, 17, possibly 19. 17 is the minimum, but there could be up to, let's say, 20, 21-year-old whiskey blended in here. There could be older ages, but I doubt it because Glenfarclas is, I think, kind of struggling a bit to get their 25-year-old, their 21-year-old, their 25-year-old, their 30-year-old, their 40-year-old, and now they've got 50-year-old regular releases, I think. So all of those need liquid to get to that age. So there may be a hesitancy to put very old stocks into the 17-year-old when they can just put 17, maybe a bit of 18, maybe a little bit of 19 in there. You get my drift. Okay, another sip. There's a little bit of salted sweet cream butter on like a bagel. So like slightly sourdoughy, slightly salty, that little bit of creamy butteriness. There's no other word for butter, which is really interesting. The finish is, well, it is long. It's sweet. You get a little bit of apple skins, some fruit skins, a little bit of tannic, astringency that carries out. But it's got a nice waxy edge. Overall, I'm really enjoying that. Let's add some water and see how it does with water added. Not too much. Again, this is 43%. And one of the things that I want to say here is that it's a little thin. And, you know, Glenfarclas 15 is 46% ABV. And hopefully that's a test for them, because I think that it's probably one of the more popular sellers, the 15-year-old. And I think the ABV really helps. So, I don't know. I think I would like to invite Glenfarclas to maybe bump up the 17 to 46. And the 12 would be, I think, ideal at 43 and not 40. That's just my opinion. But, you know, I mean, it's really hard because you've got this very classic style, and Glenfarclas has its fans. And a lot of those are people that have been enjoying Glenfarclas for decades. And they like their whiskey a certain way, and they probably don't like to add water outside of what's in the bottle, what's already been added. So there is a case for lower ABV, 43%, and I think 43% is a good minimum here. Anyway, just my 2 cents. With water, the nose gets a little bit warmer and a little bit more, again, more like a yesteryear whiskey. I'm getting some leather, some toffee notes, a good amount of leather coming in. A light little bit of cocoa. And the Oloroso sherry casks are now putting forth some darker red fruits, dried fruits. So some dark prunes. Well, prunes are dark. A little bit of apricot, but not very much. If you do like apricot, then I would highly recommend Glenfarclas 105, the 60% cask strength version. Some red currants and black currants. So quite a fruity event going on with a little bit of age, that leather. Let's taste it now. Cheers. Mm-hmm. It's creamier, juicier. It's got a sweeter edge to it, and yet it still has that slightly buttery, sweet, creamy sourdough toast type of flavor. It still has a tiny bit of tartness, but that's really kicked up the sweet edge a lot. The finish as well, you do get more fruit, more dried fruit. And I've got leather presenting itself everywhere here. The finish has really gotten a lot longer. So again, this actually disproves my point. 46% ABV. It could be too tight. 40%, which is probably would have got it at now, maybe 41. It's magnificent. It's really, really, really lovely. This isn't my first review of Glenfarclas 17. I think I tried a different version though. That was back in 2016 to celebrate the birth of my third and youngest daughter. And the fine people over at the malt shop, and especially Hungshik. Hi, Hungshik. I miss you. Gifted me a bottle of that. This was in my first few months of YouTubing. And he really jumped in and lent a hand quite a few times. So anyway, cheers to you. Kambe. It gets more and more complex, that leather really coming to the foreground. And even the mouthfeel is enhanced. So, well, that's great. Well, it's time to get on the WhiskyWhistle whiskey score for Glenfarclas 17. What is that going to be, folks? It's going to be 91 out of 100. You heard it, 91 out of 100 is the WhiskyWhistle whiskey score for Glenfarclas 17. Malt hug. Oh yeah. And a kiss. A very lovely bottle. Super happy to have this. And this will be making a return appearance on my shelf for my own personal enjoyment. The Glenfarclas 17 and the Balvenie actually will be in the very this week's Winnipeg Whiskey Club's Winter Gala. So if you're in Winnipeg and you'd like to try these, then check me out. Winnipeg Whiskey Club. You can find us. Mark at winnipegwhiskeyclub.com is my email there. All right. All right. So 91 points. Now I'm going to save the chatter and let's get right into the Balvenie 17 Doublewood. And I want a little bit of a cleansing of water here. I'm going to start neutralizing my nose in between whiskeys with some coffee beans. It smells really, really good. Okay. All right, so on to the Balvenie 17 Doublewood. The nose. There are actually quite a few similarities. I do have some leather here, but I've got cocoa right up front. And I've got some stewed orchard fruits like stewed apples and stewed pears. Caramelized is a better term. We've got toffee, we've got the cocoa. Now, I would guess we've got first fill European oak sherry casks. Well, first of all, the European oak is a big factor in flavor. They're a little bit more spicy than American oak. We have nutmeg. We have some cocoa dusted eggnog. But it's really hard to move away from the chocolate. It's got a really nice chocolate cocoa edge to it. And if I judge it simply on the nose, I'll tell you that I like the nose of the Balvenie better. Interesting. Comment about the E150A. People think of it as a neutral agent. Well, it isn't. No, it's not neutral. It's very bitter. It also adds some sugar. Absolutely, it does. And I think that you hear distillers talking a little bit about it as a kind of like the equivalent of MSG for your Chinese food. Yeah. So, I don't know. It could be making an impact here. However, I can't smell it in the glass. I can smell it occasionally in certain releases where it's heavily overused. This is only marginally overused. Stylistically also, this is very old school too. It's a yesteryear style. We've got some grassy notes coming through, some nice hay, summer hay. Pardon me. A little bit of wet hay. Some fallen leaves in autumn, which get a little bit damp and just give the air a really unique musky, floral fragrance. I quite like it, actually. So interesting. I haven't even tasted this yet. What am I doing? Okay, so onto the palate. Cheers, everybody. It's a lot spicier. We have baking spices, cinnamon and nutmeg right up front. Some sweet ginger in there as well, like ginger snaps. Less chocolatey on the palate as on the nose. Those European oak casks seem to be very fresh. And I think the sherry seasoning is too short. So it's a lot spicier on the front, on the palate, pardon me. I don't really have any rich red fruits going on. It's a spice bomb. It's got quite a bit of tannic, quite a bit of tannic flavor. The finish is zingy, zesty, spicy, lots of fresh, well, like ginger candy. And it's quite dry, anesthetizing a little bit on my lips. A little bit of red hot candies. What are they called? Hearts? Cinnamon hearts? Some cinnamon hearts. Let's add some water. And I'm going to add a little bit more because I personally think that this is just a little bit severe. Okay, a little bit more. Okay, there we go. Round and round she goes. Okay, let's let that sit for just a minute. Well, so what do you think? Which whiskey is going to win the night here on WhiskyWhistle? Where are my eyes looking? Well, okay, let's wait. Let's give it its fair shake here. We've got to give it its fair shake. Give it a try with water. Let it settle a little bit. Spicier on the nose as well. The chocolate has dissipated. I don't really have any dark fruits. It's double cask, but where's the sherry? Okay, well, it's gotten kind of flat, I'm sorry to say. On to the palate. Cheers. Well, big improvement here with water. I think you'll definitely want to try this with water. Both of them. Really interesting how well these work with water. A little bit of strawberry jam. We still have the spice there. We still have the cinnamon and the nutmeg. It's very spicy. The finish is quite long, but how does it taste? You guessed it, it's spicy. It is very gingery. It's very tannic. And frankly, I can see why they discontinued this. some Halloween molasses kisses. Yeah, my goodness. Well, it's time to get on to the WhiskyWhistle whiskey score for the Balvenie 17-year-old Doublewood. What is that going to be, folks? It's going to be 86 out of 100. You heard it, 86 out of 100 is the WhiskyWhistle whiskey score for the Balvenie Doublewood 17. Decidedly a disappointment. And just going back to Glenfarclas 17, it's really become just such an old school yesteryear style of whiskey on the nose. And so wonderfully balanced on the palate. The chocolate has returned. It's kind of a milk chocolate now. But no, it's just way too spicy. Those casks definitely need to be further seasoned with sherry in order to lose some of the tannins and put in some of the residual sugars. And I find the same thing is making Macallan 12 and 18 a little bit less lustrous than in the past. And it's just these casks, they're just not quite doing the job. You know, value-wise, you're talking like $120 or $140 in Canada for the 17. It's really one of the least expensive, older single malt whiskeys you can buy. It's excellent, and I really, really highly recommend that. And 91 points. No, it doesn't blow off the doors of WhiskyWhistle, but it does. It's keeping up in its price for sure. There are more expensive whiskeys that don't fare as well. There's a few that are less expensive that do better, but oftentimes those are special editions. So for a standard release, for a 43% big brand like Glenfarclas, I think 91 is a great score, and I think that should tell you to run out and grab yourself a bottle of that one. As for the Balvenie 17-year-old Doublewood, it's meh. Anyway, well, hope you enjoyed that. Please share me your shots. Please share me your thoughts on the Balvenie 17-year-old Doublewood and Glenfarclas 17-year-old. If you've tried them both, how do you compare these two? Which one are you more likely to buy? All these things, I'd love to hear from you. Leave me a comment. Hopefully we'll see you again very soon. I'm not sure what's next, but it's going to be great. Take care, folks. My name is Mark. Bye now.